So I really think discipleship really is, and the Christian life is living between these poles of despair and promise. And maybe a couple stories will help. When I usually teach this, I show the movie About a Boy, which is this British comedy. And it's about this guy named Will who's incredibly self-centered. He's inherited some money. He really doesn't care about anyone but himself. But he ends up finding himself kind of in a serendipitous way in a relationship with this junior high age kid, this young adolescent kid named Marcus, who's weird and strange. And Marcus starts showing up at Will's flat because his own mother has tried to commit suicide. I mean, talk about an experience of despair. And now he's basically too afraid to go home after school. So he starts showing up, and Will's very reluctant to allow him in. After all, he's a self-centered dude. But eventually he allows him in, and all they do is watch a half hour of the British game show Countdown together, and then he goes home. And in some real way, we see that just this mundane half hour of being with and for each other, of just being with Will, becomes something transformational that allows Marcus at least the courage to go home and face his world, that he knows he's not alone in the midst of it. Well, after a while, Will feels the need to, kind of reluctantly, but not knowing what to do, feels the need to say something. So he says to Marcus, so how are things at home then? And Marcus says, you mean with my mom? And Will says, yeah, how's that going? And then we hear kind of inside Marcus's consciousness. He says, terrible. That's why I come here instead of going home after school. And then we hear him say verbally, he says, or Will says, does that bother you? And we hear Marcus say, a bit, when I think about it. And Will turns to him, and with this great kind of empathetic moment, looks at him and says, "F***ing hell." And that's the end of the scene. Except the next scene, we see Marcus walking home, and he says, again in his consciousness, he says, I don't know why Will swore like that, but it made me feel better. It made me feel like I wasn't so pathetic for getting so scared. And I think one pole of discipleship is really being able to say with each other, to say, "F***ing hell." Like this. I mean, it literally is hell to have to worry that your mother has committed suicide. Or it's hell to go into the mirror and be a 13-year-old girl, weigh 85 pounds, look in the mirror and think you're fat. I mean, that's hell. Or it's hell that you're being bullied at school, or that your parents are fighting constantly. I mean, these things are real hell. And I think that's one pole, that the point of the Christian life, that God actually moves and acts through these experiences of hell. As our creedal statements have said, that Jesus Christ is found in hell. As the Nicene Creed says, that Jesus Christ descends into hell. Where is Jesus Christ found? Jesus Christ is found even in hell. But there's another kind of side to that. And it kind of connects to a story that happened in my own life, where my wife's grandfather was sick, and we knew that he went into hospice care. He was nearing death, and it was pretty clear that he would be dying in the next week or so, and we were preparing for that. And it was a Sunday morning, and we got the call that he had died, that it was over, and it was no big shock. I mean, we knew this was coming. So my wife, Cara, grabbed our son, Owen, who was probably 4 at the time, 3.5, 4, grabbed him and kind of put him in his car seat and headed off to church. And so they were driving on the freeway, and it just kind of hit her all of a sudden that she'd never see her grandfather again. And her grandmother on that side had already died, and all of a sudden, that realized that both of these grandparents had died. And so she started to kind of cry. And she noticed as she looked in the rearview mirror that Owen was watching her. So she turned to him and said, "Owen, I'm sorry, I'm crying." And he said, "Well, why?" And this was the age when he said why to everything. But why? And she said, "Oh, I'm crying because I'm sad because my grandpa has died and I'm never going to see him again. And it makes me really sad." And they got off the freeway and pulled up into the first light and stopped. And Owen turned to her and then said in a stage whisper, he said, Mommy, I have a secret." She says, "Well, what? What's your secret?" And he said, "I have a secret. One day when Jesus comes back in the very, very end, your grandpa will be alive again and you can be with him again. But mommy, it's a secret." And it really is a secret. It really is a secret. It's not the kind of secret we don't want to tell people. It's the kind of secret that if this is true, if it is possibly true that one day all death, all hate, all fear will be wiped away in the full embrace of God's love. If this is true, it is so beautiful and so wonderful that when we go to speak of it, it gets stuck in our throat. We whisper it because it rattles around our being so much that it forces us to take a deep breath to even articulate it. And I really think the Christian life is lived between these two poles of hell and I have a secret, of deep suffering that nevertheless proclaims that the tomb is empty. And we never give up one for the other, that the Christian faith really is the living between these two things, not giving one up for the other. It's a great book that was written by a theologian, Alan Lewis, who actually was dying of cancer when he wrote this book. And the book is called Holy Saturday. And it's really a theological articulation on why is it the church has always held on to Saturday as this space between Friday and Sunday. Why in our creedal statements does it say, and then on the third day Jesus rose again? Because after all, just theologically, if Jesus would have died, been fully dead, and resurrected 2 hours later, we'd still have the power of the resurrection. So why is the church tenaciously, historically tried to hold on to this 3-day pattern? And he thinks, through his theological articulation, that the reason that the church is so forcefully held on to the 3-day pattern, to Saturday, is because the church at the core knows that we live between these poles, that we live as Good Friday people and as Easter people, and we can never give up one for the other. And I think so often in youth ministry, we tend to give up the Good Friday for the triumphal Easter. But Easter is not Easter without the death of Good Friday. And of course, Good Friday is nothing but fatalism and loss without the hope of Easter. And so I think it really is, youth ministry really is living between these two poles with young people. And I think we live through those poles by being their play sharers, by being with and for them, for the sake of being with and for them, as we together seek for this God of the cross that is found at dead places, bringing forth new life. And to me, that's an incredible privilege. It's an incredible blessing, and it's incredibly perplexing and beautiful at the same time.